Once upon a warm summer evening in a city that never truly slept, the rhythm of life pulsed through the streets in a mesmerizing pattern. The story begins with Malik Thompson, a man of understated means but immense ambition, driving his humble, time-worn compact car along a busy boulevard. Malik, who, to the untrained eye, might be mistaken for an everyman struggling in the hustle of urban modernity, concealed a secret too profound for any casual glance. He was the chief executive officer of one of the most influential Fortune 500 companies in the nation. Yet, for reasons that resonated deeply within his soul and were interwoven with the complexities of identity, society, and personal validation, he chose a life of relative anonymity, embracing a simple lifestyle that defied the expectations of wealth and power. That same night, as the city lights shimmered in a hazy glow and gentle winds carried with them hints of promise and despair, Malik's thoughts danced between memories of hard-fought triumphs and the persistent pull of quiet solitude. His car, a cheap, patched-up vehicle that many would scoff at in a fancy parking lot, had been his trusted companion for years. It was a symbol of his commitment to a modest life, one where his achievements in the boardroom felt entirely separate from the gritty reality of everyday existence. And yet, on this very night, fate was poised to reintroduce him to the very world he had long kept at arm's length. The incident unfolded with the mundane precision of any routine traffic check. Out in the middle of a well-patrolled section of the boulevard, under the watchful gaze of a city cop in uniform, a man who had spent his entire career upholding the law, was Malik. The officer, whose badge and earnest expression revealed decades dedicated to the duty of protecting and serving, pulled Malik over with a firm tap on the window. It seemed, at first glance, like a commonplace event, a routine encounter that could happen to anyone. Yet, soon it would spiral into something far more profound, a collision of stereotypes, authority, and the hidden truths of identity. Malik rolled down his window, trying to mask the flicker of uncertainty that danced behind his composed eyes. The officer, a young man in his early 30s named Officer Ramirez, greeted him with a practiced calm but an underlying tension that was unmistakable. "Good evening, sir," Ramirez said in measured tones, scanning the interior of the compact car. "Do you know why I pulled you over tonight?" For a moment, Malik hesitated, his mind racing through the possible reasons: impatience with a faulty tail light, the possibility of obscure technicalities, or perhaps a misunderstanding born from a momentary lapse in judgment on his part. But as fate would have it, this encounter was destined to be more than a mere citation. Malik's thoughts were a swirl of memories and reflections, each one a fragment of the intricate mosaic of his life. "Officer, I'm not entirely sure," Malik replied evenly, his deep voice betraying no emotion even as the weight of his secret identity pressed down on him like an invisible shroud. Ramirez's eyes flickered toward Malik's identification, a ritual that had become monotonously familiar over years of duty. Yet as he scrutinized the details, a change began to ripple through his features, a subtle shift from suspicion to disbelief, and finally, an unmistakable glance of recognition. "Mr. Thompson, CEO, isn't it?" the officer asked, almost to himself, as if confirming his own doubts. Malik's lightly furrowed brow spoke of surprise, and the atmosphere inside the car charged with an unexpected intensity. The officer's tone had betrayed the notion that he was no longer dealing with just another traffic violation, but with a man whose life was far more astonishing than anyone, including himself, had ever imagined. As the cool night air whispered against the windows, the scene unfolded into a dialogue that bridged the chasm between appearances and truth. Malik's calm composure slowly yielded to an openness, a cautious vulnerability that allowed him to speak not just as an executive with countless responsibilities, but as a human being grappling with the intricacies of a life lived in two distinct worlds. "Officer, I have known you for many years now," Malik began, choosing his words with care and sincerity that resonated with a quiet dignity. "I remember the nights when the city knew me only as that quiet soul driving the humble car, the man who was never meant for the spotlight." Officer Ramirez took a measured breath, his demeanor shifting from the rigidity of duty to that of a man caught between the roles of enforcer and witness to an extraordinary story. "I have, Mr. Thompson," he admitted softly. I never imagined that behind the eyes of the man I once knew as a difficult commuter hiding in plain sight was one of our country's leading corporate minds. The revelation hung delicately between them, the weight of its significance transforming the very air in the car. In that moment, beyond tickets and traffic laws, there flickered a mutual recognition of the burdens borne by those who walked unseen paths, paths marked by prejudice, expectation, dreams, and the subtle complexity of living authentically. Rhythms of memories interwove with present uncertainty, creating a tapestry of thoughts that spanned the entirety of Malik's colorful and multifaceted life. His childhood had been punctuated by the determination to overcome society's preconceptions. Growing up in neighborhoods where opportunity was a scarce commodity, Malik was determined to break the cycle that tethered many to a fate of mediocrity. He had clawed his way through academic rigors, social stigmas, and a cultural landscape that too often operated under the weight of implicit bias. His drive was fueled by a relentless passion to rewrite the narrative of what it meant to be a black man in a system designed for conformity. Yet, even as he ultimately soared to the dizzying heights of corporate success, he remained mindful of his origins, of a life lived under the shadow of assumptions made on the basis of skin and socioeconomic status. Officer Ramirez, too, felt the winds of change in that brief exchange. His own story was one of challenges and gradual revelations. Raised in a small town where the lines between right and wrong were often demarcated in stark absolutes, he had joined the police force with a fierce desire to uphold the law and protect his community. However, the complexities of human nature had slowly forced him to reconsider simplistic notions of justice. Tonight, faced with a man who embodied those complexities in every facet of his being, Ramirez's preconceptions began to crumble, replaced by a newfound respect for the richness of human experience and the necessity for empathy in a world too often divided by superficial differences. Their conversation continued in a tone that was both respectful and transformative. Malik explained how living simply had allowed him to observe the unvarnished truths of life, truths that many of his affluent counterparts had long forgotten. "I chose this path, this less glamorous path, because it reminds me every day of who I was and who I want to be," he said, his voice carrying a quiet conviction that resonated beyond the confines of the narrow car interior. "In the shadow of my fortune, there is a light that belongs to every person who has ever been underestimated." His words, rich with meaning, conveyed a philosophy that transcended the boundaries of corporate success and entered the realm of personal redemption. As Malik's story unfurled, the interplay between fate and free will became apparent. That very evening had been set in motion by decisions made long ago, choices that resonated in ways that defied the logic of cause and effect. Malik's ascension to the upper echelons of American business was not merely the result of talent and hard work. It was also the direct outcome of countless small, often overlooked moments. The decision to drive a modest car was one such moment, a deliberate act of rebellion against the conventions of a world fixated on symbols of wealth. And now, as the officer and the CEO conversed under the indifferent gaze of streetlights, the barriers between them began to dissolve. In an unexpected twist that fanned the flames of curiosity even further, Malik revealed that earlier that week, he had been invited to a grand corporate gala, a glittering celebration of wealth and power. Instead, he had chosen to spend the evening with his mentor and friend, a man who had taught him not just how to succeed in business, but also how to navigate the complexities of life with grace and humility. That friend, his once boss who had later left him after a misunderstood betrayal, had walked away, leaving Malik with a sense of bittersweet fulfillment. "I went out one night with my boss instead of him, and he took it to heart and decided to leave me," Malik confessed, his eyes reflecting pain that ran deeper than any boardroom drama. The words, laden with the ache of abandoned trust and the possibility of lost companionship, illuminated the subtle fractures in Malik's carefully constructed world, a world built on the dual foundations of ambition and compromise. Officer Ramirez listened intently, nodding in understanding as he considered his own grappling with betrayal and loyalty. He recalled a time when he'd been dismissed by his peers for asking uncomfortable questions, a time when his dedication to truth had clashed with the expectations of a rigid system. The recollection stirred in him memories of his own encounters with prejudice, the moments when he'd seen the lines between authority and fairness blur into barely visible shadows of regret and misjudgment. "I know what it means to feel betrayed, Mr. Thompson," Ramirez remarked softly. "Sometimes the ones we trust the most choose a path that leaves us questioning not only our decisions, but the very nature of loyalty." In that heartfelt admission, the officer's stern exterior melted away, replaced by compassion and the shared knowledge of life's unpredictable turns. As the conversation deepened, so did Malik's reflections on power and authenticity. The CEO revealed that, despite his staggering professional success, he often felt imprisoned by the trappings of high society, a gilded cage that prevented him from being entirely himself. In the corporate realm, he had to conform to a strict set of expectations and behaviors that diluted his true identity. Yet, behind closed doors and in the silent solitude of the night, Malik reclaimed the essence of who he was, a man shaped by struggle, enriched by mistakes, and inspired by the unyielding desire to be true to his roots. "There's a certain irony in the way we choose to live our lives," he mused. "I find that in my attempt to scale the heights of success, I've often lost sight of the simple truths that once gave my life meaning." Ramirez listened, aware that this was not a story of unadulterated triumph, but one of complexity, sacrifice, and the inevitable clash between societal expectations and internal authenticity. In a rare moment of vulnerability outside the rigid confines of protocol, the officer shared his own doubts about the institution he served. "There have been times, Mr. Thompson, when I questioned if the law truly served justice, or if it was just a veneer for the real power that operates in the shadows." His tone was laden with a mixture of regret and hope, a reflection of the internal war that had waged within him since the early days of his career. It's hard to stand on the side of authority when you see how easily it can be manipulated by prejudice and unspoken assumptions. The revelation seemed to spark a quiet solidarity between the two men. Though their worlds were seemingly disparate, they found common ground in the struggle to bridge the divide between public duty and private truth. Malik, with a semblance of a smile that belied his inner turmoil, responded, "I've spent countless years building an empire, only to realize that one can never truly escape the shadow of their beginnings. No amount of success, no matter how staggering, can erase the fingerprints of who you once were." In that moment, the conversation took on a philosophical tone. The narrative of their lives, replete with unexpected turns and hidden sorrows, coalesced into a shared understanding that the roles imposed by society often dictated a life that was neither fully free nor entirely authentic. The night pressed on, and the sky offered a majestic canopy, studded with twinkling stars as if to confirm that even in the darkest hours, light could find a way to shine through. Within the confines of that humble car, a world away from the towering skyscrapers and opulent boardrooms, Malik and Officer Ramirez discovered something profoundly transformative, a brief respite from the burdens of expectation and the freedom found in accepting one's own truth. Their conversation drifted seamlessly from the intricacies of corporate governance to the subtleties of human emotion, from breathtaking reminiscences of past hardships to the cautious hope that better days lay ahead. For Malik, each word spoken bound him more tightly to a life of introspection, even as he continued to play the dual roles expected of him. For Ramirez, the revelation was equally defining, a reconfirmation that within the framework of his duty lay the potential to challenge, reform, and ultimately humanize the institution he served. The universe, in its enigmatic wisdom, had conspired on this night to bring together two souls who both wondered about the true meaning of justice, loyalty, and identity. While the encounter might have been dismissed as another minor incident in the annals of routine policing, for those involved it became a moment of reckoning, a precious junction where paths intersected and diverged in unexpected ways. Even as the formalities of the traffic stop resumed, the exchange of necessary details, the respectful bidding of good night, the undercurrent of their encounter lingered as a testament to life's ambiguous complexities. In the glow of a flickering street lamp, Malik resumed his journey, the soft hum of his car soundtrack to a new chapter of contemplation and silent revolution. In the days that followed, Malik's unexpected brush with authority and the ensuing conversation continued to reverberate within him. He found himself pondering the choices that had long defined his existence, from the early hustle of a street kid determined to escape the confines of a predetermined destiny, to his ascent to the zenith of economic power, all the while wearing a mask of normalcy that belied the extraordinary circumstances of his life. With each passing moment, the past and present intermingled, urging him to consider the true price of authenticity in a world where appearances often held as much sway as reality. His mind roamed back to fond recollections of his youth, when dreams were pure and the promise of change shimmered on the horizon. There was a certain poetic irony in the way life unfolded, a reminder that sometimes the most significant revelations occur not in moments of triumph, but in unexpected interactions with those who force us to reevaluate our perceptions. Meanwhile, Officer Ramirez was equally transformed by that fateful encounter. In the sterile confines of the police station, as he filled out the bureaucratic forms necessary to finalize the traffic stop, his thoughts strayed beyond the rigid lines of protocol. He found himself questioning long-held beliefs about the nature of authority, the role of the institution he served, and the unseen forces that shaped the lives of those he encountered on the beat. The dialogue that night had unearthed dormant uncertainties, compelling him to delve deeper into a self-examination that transcended the typical black-and-white narratives of right and wrong. In quiet moments between duty calls and the hum of nightly patrols, the memory of Malik's words lingered, a gentle reminder that personal identity was often the most complex story of all. As days turned into weeks, the ripple effects of that singular night began to influence the interplay of relationships in Malik's professional and personal spheres. At the towering headquarters of his Fortune 500 company, boardroom meetings carried an altered cadence. Discussions that once circled around fiscal figures and market strategies now occasionally veered into unexpectedly human territories, questions of ethics, true leadership, and staying connected to one's roots. Employees, having caught wind of the CEO's choice to maintain an unpretentious lifestyle despite his corporate eminence, began to admire not only his business acumen, but also the rare authenticity in his demeanor. It was as if, in choosing to live unassumingly, Malik had inadvertently imparted a powerful lesson. Success, however grand, was hollow without the courage of sincerity. Among those who truly appreciated this paradox was Naomi Harris, Malik's trusted advisor and the architect of many of his bold, transformative initiatives. A woman endowed with a sharp intellect tempered by compassion, Naomi had long been a bridge between the corridors of power and the everyday struggles of the company's workforce. In quiet moments, over cups of steaming coffee in the early hours before the office fully stirred to life, she would confide in Malik about her admiration for his integrity and her own doubts. "It is rare," she often said with gentle emphasis, "to find someone in your position who is unafraid to wear the marks of their past, for it is in those marks that true character is revealed." Her words resonated deeply with Malik, reinforcing the notion that vulnerability was not a liability but a strength that could pave the way for real change. Yet, fate has its own intricate designs, and the universe continued to test Malik in unforeseen ways. Just as he was beginning to find solace in this newfound balance between the personal and the professional, a scandal erupted that forced him to confront the unsightly specters of jealousy, betrayal, and the high stakes of corporate politics. Rumors began to circulate within the glass walls and manicured lawns of the business world, whispers that suggested his decision to maintain a life in relative obscurity might have been a prelude to hidden agendas and questionable alliances. Old rivals, ever watchful for any opportunity to tarnish his hard-won reputation, stoked the fires of doubt with carefully crafted narratives that painted his modest habits not as acts of humility, but as potential weaknesses ripe for exploitation. The media, quick to pounce on what they deemed a scandalous twist, spun stories that wove together threads of racial prejudice, corporate intrigue, and personal betrayal, effectively turning Malik's life into a veritable public drama. Headlines screamed of a CEO in cheap car, questioning whether a man who maintained such an unorthodox lifestyle could truly lead an enterprise that represented the zenith of American capitalism. In dinner conversations in affluent neighborhoods and echoing sound bites on primetime television, the narrative of Malik's life morphed into a modern parable, a tale of a man who defied both the economic class system and the rigid perceptions of race. And, in the eye of the media storm, Malik found himself besieged by both adoration and suspicion. Every public appearance was scrutinized, every word analyzed as if it possessed some double entendre that only the skeptics could decipher. Yet, amid the cacophony of criticism and praise, Malik remained resolute, anchored in the unwavering conviction that his authenticity was his greatest asset. It was in the midst of this maelstrom that Naomi and a select group of loyal executives gathered in a confidential meeting to chart a path forward. In a room polished not just with expensive decor but with the weight of shared purpose, they spoke candidly about the challenge of reconciling public perception with personal truth. "We are at a crossroads," one senior executive declared, his voice steady despite the palpable tension in the air. "Our leader is not defined solely by what we see on the surface, a cheap car, a simple lifestyle, but by the ideals he represents: resilience, humility, and an unwavering commitment to authenticity." Their words, spoken with both determination and hope, served to consolidate the group's unity, paving the way for a renewed corporate strategy that embraced the inherent contradictions of modern leadership. As they plotted out ways to leverage Malik's complex narrative to inspire both shareholders and everyday employees alike, the scandal began to take on a new dimension, a powerful lesson in the transformative potential of living life true to oneself, no matter the odds. In the midst of the boardroom deliberations, Malik found solace in long, solitary walks through the city's back alleys, areas that seemed untouched by the glitz and glamour of corporate power. It was during these moments of introspection that he recalled his early days, filled with unbridled optimism and a profound belief in the possibility of change. The streets held memories of laughter shared with friends, struggles overcome through unity, and the unspoken resolve not to be defined by the limitations imposed by society. Each step he took was laden with meaning. Every familiar storefront and unassuming corner was a reminder that the measure of success was not found in material accumulation, but in the fulfillment of staying true to one's convictions. As the scandal slowly subsided into a quieter undertow of public interest, and the city began its inevitable return to normalcy, Malik's inner transformation continued to ripple outward. In what he would later describe as a time of rebirth, he redefined the boundaries of power and leadership by championing a corporate philosophy that celebrated vulnerability, inclusiveness, and the transformative power of empathy. His speeches began to reflect this shift, rich with anecdotes of personal setbacks and triumphs, interlaced with a determination to effect social change not merely in boardrooms, but in the larger tapestry of community life. "True leadership," he would say in measured tones during public forums, "does not lie in the perfection of our achievements, but in the courage it takes to confront our imperfections and learn from them. In doing so, we pave the way for a future where authenticity reigns above all." One crisp autumn evening several months later, fate once again orchestrated an encounter that would test the bounds of perception and expectation. Malik attended a charity gala, not as the aloof CEO ensconced in corporate isolation, but as a man who had weathered the storms of public scrutiny and emerged with his conviction even stronger. The event was held in a grand historic mansion, its opulent halls decorated with an array of artful tributes to the city's cultural legacy. There, amidst the murmur of polite conversation and the clink of crystal glasses, Malik encountered a face from his past, a man whose presence stirred bittersweet memories of days when the boundaries between employer and friend were blurred by shared dreams and painful betrayals. Marcus Bellamy, the former boss whose departure had once left Malik reeling with both sorrow and determination, now stood as an emblem of bygone glory and unresolved resentment. The two men exchanged cautious greetings beneath the soft glow of a chandelier that had witnessed the rise and fall of many a hopeful soul. "Malik," Marcus began, his tone a mixture of contrition and pride, "it has been too long." The words, though simple in their construction, carried the embedded emotion of years wasted in silence and the unspoken acknowledgement of past misunderstandings. Malik's eyes, reflecting a lifetime of lessons learned, met Marcus's. For a long moment, no words were exchanged, only the shared recognition of the passage of time and the myriad choices that had divided their paths. Slowly, Malik recounted the evening that had altered so much in his life, the encounter with Officer Ramirez, the wake of the scandal that had threatened to undermine every carefully built foundation, and ultimately, the soul-searching that had led him to embrace a life of true authenticity. "I have learned," Malik said quietly, that the measure of a man is not in the power he holds, but in the humility with which he accepts his vulnerabilities. In the end, our struggles define us far more than our triumphs. Marcus listened, his eyes clouded with a mixture of regret and admiration, understanding in that moment that the years of bitterness had been replaced by a desire for reconciliation, a longing to reclaim the essence of true leadership that had so often been compromised by the machinations of corporate ambition. In the ensuing conversations that lasted well into the night, old wounds were gently probed and new bridges cautiously built. The gala, with its glittering surroundings and cultured ambience, had become an unlikely forum for a reunion that transcended simple business re-engagement. It was a collision of souls, a reminder that the lessons of the past could, if understood correctly, nurture an enriched future. For Malik, the night represented not just a reconciliation with an old friend, but a broader acceptance of all the complexities that had shaped him, a full embrace of his identity as a brilliant business mind, a humble man with roots in struggle, and a stalwart believer in the power of redemption. Back at his residence after the gala, Malik sat quietly by a window overlooking the softly illuminated streets. The night was deep and contemplative, and as he sipped a modest glass of his favorite tea, he thought about the interconnected threads of destiny that had woven together his life. In that still, solitary moment, the memories of every twist and turn, every encounter that had left an indelible mark on his journey, formed a silent oath, the promise to remain true, no matter how daunting the weight of external expectations might be. It was in that promise that Malik found a renewed strength, a scaffolding for future endeavors that would challenge outdated paradigms and replace them with the unyielding force of authenticity. In the months that followed, news of Malik's transformative leadership began to reverberate far beyond the confines of boardrooms and corporate summits. His public addresses resonated in communities often overlooked by the corridors of wealth. He became a voice for those who were, like him, misunderstood by the superficialities of appearance, yet judged harshly by an uncompromising society. In interviews, he spoke passionately about the need to dismantle preconceived notions, not just within isolated industries, but across the entire fabric of societal interaction. When we allow stereotypes to dictate our path, Malik once pronounced in a televised dialogue, we imprison our true potential behind invisible walls constructed by ignorance. Today, we stand at the threshold of a new era, a time for us to reclaim our stories and reshape the narrative with every step we take and every word of truth we utter. His journey, however, was not without ongoing challenges. Malik's refusal to succumb to the conventional trappings of wealth and to adhere to the rigid expectations of icons forced him to navigate a labyrinth of corporate disputes and personal betrayals. At one pivotal meeting, as senior executives debated the next big step for the company, a fierce clash of opinions ignited. Some board members argued that a more conventional, ostentatious display of wealth was necessary to maintain competitive credibility, while others, influenced by Malik's personal example, championed a more restrained yet principled approach that valued substance over spectacle. The debates were intense and emotional, emblematic of a larger cultural war between the old guard and a new breed of leadership that valued integrity above profit margins. Through it all, Malik maintained an unwavering calm, his strategic insights and measured responses guiding the meeting toward an outcome that balanced profitability with a renewed commitment to social responsibility. Our strength, he asserted, lies not in mimicking the conventions of the past, but in daring to be different. It is in our authenticity and our courage to challenge expectations that true innovation is born. Meanwhile, Officer Ramirez continued to find that fateful conversation vividly etched in his heart. Determined to act upon the insights he had gained from Malik, he initiated subtle reforms within his precinct, championing a more empathetic approach to law enforcement, one that recognized the value of dialogue over confrontation. With quiet perseverance, he worked to retrain his colleagues on the importance of understanding the unique circumstances of every individual they encountered, seeking to bridge the ever-widening gap between authority and community. Over time, whispers of these changes spread throughout the department, inspiring a quiet but meaningful transformation that echoed Malik's own philosophy. In a serendipitous moment, as if fate were scripting these intertwined destinies, a charity initiative was born, an annual summit dedicated to bringing together leaders from disparate walks of life to discuss, debate, and ultimately collaborate on solving the pressing societal issues of the day. Malik, along with Naomi, Ramirez, and other luminaries from both the corporate and civic spheres, lent their voices to this initiative. The summit quickly garnered attention and admiration from all corners of the nation, becoming a beacon for those who believed that progress could only be achieved through harmonious dialogue and a sincere acknowledgement of shared humanity. Every year, as the summit convened under the gentle glow of shared purpose and aspiration, Malik would recount the story of the night he was pulled over in a cheap car, an account that, far from diminishing his accomplishments, underscored the critical reminder that humility and authenticity are the true hallmarks of greatness. In time, even the scars of betrayal, the pain of having a mentor abandon him for reasons he could only later understand, began to recede into the background of Malik's life story. Rather than allowing bitterness to take root, he chose to view that chapter as a catalyst for growth. The departure of his former boss had inadvertently set him on a path that prioritized personal integrity over empty accolades, a journey that reaffirmed the belief that sometimes the deepest wounds might pave the way for the most meaningful transformations. Late at night, when the echoes of corporate battles were replaced by the gentle whispers of memory, Malik would revisit the day he had been pulled over by Officer Ramirez. Realizing that the encounter was not a moment of humiliation, but rather the spark that ignited a long overdue internal revolution. As autumn gave way to winter, and winter slowly yielded to the gentle promise of spring, Malik's personal and professional life continued to merge in unexpected ways. His legacy, a dynamic blend of corporate brilliance, social empathy, and a relentless drive to remain accessible to those who had once seen him as an anomaly, became a subject of discussion at colleges, in community centers, and around dinner tables across the country. Educators invited him to speak about the nuanced intersections of identity and power, while young professionals found in his life a blueprint for balancing ambition with authenticity. In every conversation, every public engagement, Malik reminded his audience that success was not measured solely by financial gains or glamorous portrayals in the media, but by the resilience and honesty with which one confronted life's relentless challenges. Officer Ramirez's own journey of introspection bore fruit in ways both personal and professional. Inspired by Malik's unwavering commitment to truth, he would often recount the remarkable encounter to new recruits, emphasizing that behind every uniform was a person grappling with the same fears, doubts, and hopes as the community he served. His gentle persistence gradually began to alter the perspective of his colleagues, creating ripples that promised to reshape the future of law enforcement. Discussions about justice, bias, and empathy were no longer brushed aside as mere abstractions, but were embraced as necessary ingredients in forging a better path forward, a path that acknowledged the complexities of identity while striving to uphold the dignity of all individuals. In the final chapters of this extraordinary journey, Malik's story reached an awakening that resonated far beyond the boardrooms and busy streets of the city he called home. As he prepared to step down from the helm of his company, a decision made not out of defeat but as a natural progression of a life in perpetual evolution, he addressed his employees and stakeholders in an emotionally charged farewell. In a speech that would later be immortalized as one of the most transformative addresses in corporate history, he spoke candidly about the lessons learned from life's unpredictable twists. "I have spent years chasing numbers, climbing ladders, and meeting expectations," he began, his voice firm and clear. "But throughout it all, I have come to understand that the true measure of success lies in finding and nurturing the authenticity buried deep within each of us." His words, laden with the echoes of every hardship overcome, bridged the gap between the polished veneer of corporate achievement and the raw, often painful realities from which genuine strength is born. As the audience sat in rapt silence, Malik urged them all to look inward and to find solace and inspiration in the very imperfections that made each of them unique. "Remember," he concluded, "that no matter how far you travel from your roots, the truth of who you are remains. It is this truth that will always guide you back home, no matter how lost you might feel in the labyrinth of success." The silence that followed was not simply the absence of sound, but the palpable reverence of a crowd united by the shared experience of being touched by a man who had defied expectations and, in the process, redefined what it meant to live truly. In the years that followed Malik's departure from the corporate stage, his legacy continued to inspire new generations of leaders. The annual summit evolved into an institution, a living monument to the possibility of change driven by honest self-reflection and courage. Officer Ramirez, now rising through the ranks while never abandoning the empathy that had once transformed him, continued to forge bridges between law enforcement and the communities he served. Malik's story, with its twists and turns, its betrayals and redemptions, became a beacon for anyone struggling to reconcile the life they were destined to lead with the person they truly desired to be. And so, in the intertwining tales of a simple car pulled over on a fateful night, a reformed officer, and a CEO who dared to be real, a profound, enduring truth was born: that life, in all its unpredictable splendor, is best navigated with the unyielding courage to be oneself, even if that truth is sometimes hidden behind the facade of a cheap car and an unassuming exterior. For in the end, it is our shared humanity, our willingness to embrace the full spectrum of our experiences, that lights the way forward, guiding us through darkness into the dawn of a future shaped by hope, resilience, and the timeless quest for authenticity. The tale is one of redemption, defiance, and the quiet power of vulnerability. It teaches us that no matter how far we stray from our origins, the whispers of our past have the strength to shape a future far greater than any single monetary achievement. In the memory of every quiet conversation and every unexpected encounter, there lies a promise that when we dare to peel away the layers of societal expectation, we find a truth that sets our hearts free. As Malik's legacy was woven into the fabric of the city and into the hearts of those he touched, it became abundantly clear that greatness might be found in the unlikeliest of forms. A man in a cheap car whose journey was nothing short of extraordinary, a man who transformed the very idea of leadership by living his truth fearlessly and with profound compassion. As the years turned into decades, the story of this remarkable knight was passed on from one generation to another, a myth for our times, a gentle reminder that behind every statistic or headline, there is a human story brimming with hope, struggle, and the potential for change. And while the world continued to evolve, with new challenges and triumphs dotting the passage of time, Malik's enduring message echoed in the quiet moments of introspection in boardrooms, classrooms, police precincts, and the countless communities striving to build bridges across divides. In the final analysis, the journey of Malik Thompson, Officer Ramirez, and even Marcus Bellamy, who had by then reconciled with the ghosts of his past, was not simply a corporate saga or a cautionary tale of societal prejudices. It was a living, breathing reminder that authenticity thrives in the space between grand accomplishments and quiet moments of humility. It reminds us that our greatest strength lies not in our superficial symbols of success, but in the sincere courage to remain anchored in who we truly are. And so, as the curtain falls on this narrative, a luminous tapestry of human experience woven with resilience, empathy, and hope, the city continues its ceaseless pulse of life, carrying forward the indelible imprint of a man in a cheap car who, on one unforgettable night, transformed the very notion of what it means to be a leader, a believer, and a human being. May his story serve as a beacon to all who dare to challenge the boundaries of expectation, and may we forever remember that the journey toward authenticity is the bravest journey of all. In that final, enduring moment of twilight, when the lights of the metropolis glimmered like so many distant dreams, Malik's legacy shone as a testament to the power of vulnerability and genuine connection, a beacon that continues to guide those daring enough to step off the beaten path and into the radiant uncertainty of their own truth.